Okay, let's dive into something really fascinating today. We've got these sources here describing, well, a trip to the coast and a plant discovery that turned out to be anything but simple.
Yeah, it starts with a pretty relatable scene, doesn't it? You've got Kesser and Steen. They're out walking near the beach and they spot this flower, just, absolutely beautiful.
So beautiful, apparently, that their companion, Tante Frun, her first thought, according to the source material, was this has to be some kind of super rare orchid.
Right, you can picture it, something really striking.
Totally.
And, well, that initial guess, that orchid idea, that's really our jumping off point for this deep dive. We're using these excerpts from Ager Kohvede to unpack the details. Our mission, essentially, is to figure out from the sources what Kesser and Steen actually found and why it matters.
Okay, so they see this amazing flower, maybe thinking orchid, maybe just wow. They grab a photo, naturally, and then, like anyone would, they hit the internet trying to identify it.
Yep. And that's where the sources identify it for us. Not an orchid, but Ager Kohvede. The scientific name is Melampyrum arvense, field cow wheat in English.
Field cowweed. So not an orchid, but is it still rare? Tante Frun wasn't completely off base about it being special?
No, she wasn't. That's the interesting thing. The sources make it clear that, okay, not an orchid, but Ager Kohvede is genuinely rare here in Denmark. It's actually on the red list.
Oh, okay.
That likes very specific conditions. Dry, open spots, often lime-rich soil. You find it on coastal slopes, like where Kesser and Steen were, or maybe some types of grasslands. That Ager part of its name, it means field, which kind of points to where its relatives might grow.
Right, right. So it's rare at like specific spots. But the sources also mention something, well, kind of weird about how it lives, how it gets food.
Exactly. This is where it gets really, really interesting. The sources describe it as an annual herb, so it lives its whole life cycle in 1 year.
Okay.
But the kicker is, it's a hemiparasite.
Hemiparasite. So
So
like a half a parasite. What does that mean?
pretty much. It does photosynthesize, makes some of its own food using sunlight, but it also connects its roots to the roots of other plants around it.
No way.
Yeah, it taps right in to steal water and nutrients from its neighbors. It's a survival strategy.
Wow.
And the source also mentions it works with certain soil fungi, too, these microscopic fungi called arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. They help it get even more nutrients, so it's got multiple strategies going on.
That's a lot going on for a pretty flower.
Yeah.
So this whole parasite thing, the sources link it to something else happening on the coast, don't they? Something about invasive plants.
Yes, exactly. This is where the context of Kesser and Steen's find gets really important. The sources point out that in these coastal areas, Ager Kohvede is often found growing right next to, and sometimes on, an invasive species, specifically the wrinkled rose, Rosa rugosa.
The wrinkled rose.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the one people are always trying to get rid of from the dunes.
That's the one. Conservation groups often work hard to remove it because it can take over native habitats.
So hang on. If this rare native Ager Kohvede is a hemiparasite, and it's growing right there with the invasive rose, you're saying it might be feeding off the rose.
That's what the sources suggest, yes. It parasitizes various things, often grasses, but finding it potentially tapping into the wrinkled rose, this invasive plant we dislike, well, that's a fascinating ecological twist.
It really is. But it creates a problem, doesn't it? A kind of dilemma. Like, if Kesser and Steen or anyone finds this rare plant growing on the invasive rose, and then someone else comes along trying to remove the rose.
Precisely. That's the conservation puzzle the sources highlight. If you pull out the invasive host, the wrinkled rose, are you accidentally harming the rare native plant that's learned to rely on it? At least partly.
Huh. Yeah, that's tricky. Unintended consequences.
It really makes you think about how complex these ecosystems are.
Definitely. And just going back to the plant itself, the sources describe the flower nicely too, right? What does it actually look like?
They do. It mentions these really striking cyclamen-colored or pink flowers. They're clustered together in this dense spike, almost like a little cone.
Pretty.
Yeah, and it blooms in summer, June to August usually, which fits perfectly with when Kesser and Steen would likely be out exploring.
And there's a historical twist too, about why it's rare now. Something about farming.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
quite a story. Turns out, Ager Kohvede used to be considered a weed in grain fields. Its seeds lie very similar to wheat grains. So back when grain cleaning wasn't as sophisticated, these seeds would get mixed in with the harvest.
Oh, I see.
And they could actually discolor the flour, make it look sort of grayish or violet, so farmers actively tried to get rid of it. Over time, that pressure, plus changes in farming, really contributed to its decline.
Wow, so a former pest has now protected rare species.
Exactly. Quite the
Wow.
turnaround.
It's just amazing, from thinking it's an orchid to finding out it's this rare hemiparasite, maybe living off an invasive species with this whole history as a weed. It really shows how much is going on with just one plant. And when people like Kesser and Steen find it and, document it, that adds to our understanding of these complicated relationships, like that whole rose situation.
Absolutely. And that's perhaps the most provocative thought these sources leave us with, this conservation question. If this rare native plant, Ager Kohvede, has adapted to use an invasive species like the wrinkled rose as a host, what does that imply for managing that invasive species?
Right.
Do efforts to remove the rose need to be more nuanced in areas where this rare plant is also living? Does protecting the native mean sometimes tolerating the invasive or finding different ways to manage it?
It's a complex question with no easy answers, I guess.
Definitely something to think about.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive. Thanks for unpacking these sources with us. And thank you for joining us. Hopefully it makes you look a little closer the next time you're out and about. You never know what complex stories are hiding in plain sight. Okay, let's dive into something really fascinating today.